You felt it before you understood it. The distance, the resistance, the quiet separation that followed you from room to room. You are not ordinary. You never were. There has always been something about you that disrupted comfort, something in your presence that unsettled normal conversations, something in your silence that spoke louder than noise. And you wondered why. Why did they pull away? Why did they misunderstand you? Why did doors close before you even knocked? Listen carefully. Rejection is not random in the life of the chosen. It is prophetic. There are 9 signs that reveal you are spiritually appointed to lead the very people who once rejected you. Not beside them, not beneath them, but ahead of them. This message is not for everyone. It is for the ones who have felt isolated without explanation, for the ones who carried favor and warfare at the same time, for the ones who were pushed out before they were called up. If this resonates in your spirit, you already know. Stay with this. Lean in. Because what you thought was loss was positioning, and as this truth confirms what your soul has always known, make sure you stand with this message. Align with it. Connect with it. Because only the chosen recognize this frequency. Now listen. First, rejection marked you before promotion ever found you. You remember it. The subtle shift in the room, the way certain people grew cold without cause, the way you were excluded without explanation. They sensed something. You were different, not louder, not arrogant, different. Your perspective went deeper. Your questions pierced comfort. Your presence carried weight, and that weight disturbed what was shallow. You thought something was wrong with you. You examined yourself. You tried to shrink. You tried to fit, but you could not compress destiny into small spaces. Leadership cannot be shaped in crowds. It is forged in isolation. While others were bonding over familiarity, you were being separated for formation. While they were finding comfort in sameness, you were being stretched in solitude. That early rejection was not social failure. It was spiritual marking. Darkness recognizes light before light recognizes itself. The enemy could sense assignment on you before you had language for it. So resistance showed up early. Opposition showed up early. Distance showed up early. Because you were never meant to blend in. You were meant to stand ahead. Psychologically, rejection forces self-awareness. It forces inner strength. It forces identity development outside validation. Spiritually, it creates endurance. It deepens discernment. It detaches you from approval addiction. You were being trained. Every moment you stood alone strengthened your spine. Every misunderstanding built emotional muscle. Every dismissal carved humility into you. You were not overlooked, you were being prepared. And now look at you, still standing, still growing, still called. The same difference they rejected is the same difference that qualifies you. The same fire they feared is the same fire that will guide them. The same isolation that hurt you is the same isolation that forged authority. You did not lose. You were marked. And if rejection came before recognition, if isolation came before affirmation, if warfare came before favor, then understand this. Promotion is not coming, it is aligning. Second, their opposition strengthened you instead of breaking you. You felt the attack, not once, not twice, but in waves, the whispers, the exclusion, the subtle attempts to belittle you. They thought pressure would shrink you. They thought shame would silence you. They thought resistance would send you running. But you did not collapse. You bent. You learned. You endured. Have you noticed that every time they tried to expose your weakness, something inside you grew steadier? Every time they questioned your worth, you were forced to find it within. Every time they pushed you out, you discovered you could stand alone. That was not survival. That was strengthening. What was meant to shame you sharpened you. Darkness applied pressure, but pressure did not destroy you. It developed you. The chosen are not fragile. They are forged. While others break under misunderstanding, you built endurance. While others retaliate, you learned restraint. While others crumble in isolation, you cultivated inner authority. That is not normal growth. That is spiritual conditioning. You developed emotional endurance beyond your years. You learned how to stay calm when falsely accused. You learned how to move wisely when surrounded by envy. You learned how to discern spirits instead of reacting to personalities. That is warfare maturity. The enemy wanted you reactive. God needed you refined. There is a difference. Pressure didn't collapse you. It carved capacity into you. Capacity to lead. Capacity to absorb tension without exploding. Capacity to carry weight that would crush ordinary minds. And this is why you cannot hate them. Because unknowingly, they participated in your training. Every insult stretched your patience. Every betrayal expanded your discernment. Every closed door increased your spiritual stamina. You are harder to shake now, harder to intimidate, harder to manipulate. Why? Because you have already survived emotional warfare. You have already endured silent battles. You have already stood in rooms where you were unwanted and remained dignified. That is leadership formation. Leaders are not built in applause. They are built in adversity. Light does not fear darkness. It learns how to shine within it. And you learned. You learned how to master your emotions. You learned how to detach from validation. You learned how to keep your spirit clean while others projected their insecurity onto you. That is strength, quiet strength, dangerous strength. The same people who thought they were weakening you were unknowingly increasing your capacity to lead them. Because when chaos rises, they will look for the one who does not panic. When tension escalates, they will look for the one who remains grounded. When confusion spreads, they will look for the one who carries clarity. That one is you. You were not attacked because you were weak. You were attacked because you were emerging. Warfare follows favor. Opposition surrounds anointing. And you survived it. Not bitter, not broken, but built. That is not accidental. That is appointment. And if opposition strengthened you, if pressure expanded you, if shame sharpened you instead of silencing you, then understand this: you are not just marked, you are tempered. Third, you see their wounds even after they misjudged you. Pause and recognize this. After everything they said, after the distance, after the quiet rejection, after the subtle attempts to minimize you, you still saw through them. You saw the insecurity behind the arrogance. You saw the fear behind the criticism. You saw the unhealed pain behind the hostility. Why? Because you are not just emotionally strong, you are spiritually perceptive. Most people respond to rejection with retaliation. The world teaches defense. Darkness feeds on bitterness. But you did not become bitter. You became discerning. That is not weakness, that is leadership. Have you ever noticed how quickly you can read a room? How easily you sense tension beneath words? How clearly you feel what others are trying to hide? That is not overthinking. That is spiritual sight. Leaders see brokenness where others see enemies. While others labeled them toxic, you saw trauma. While others walked away in anger, you understood patterns. While others hardened their hearts, you felt compassion rise. Compassion, when bitterness had every right to live there. That is not normal. Bitterness would have been easy. Bitterness would have felt justified. Bitterness would have aligned with the wound. But you are not aligned with wounds. You are aligned with assignment. Darkness wanted your heart contaminated. The enemy wanted your spirit hardened. Because a hardened leader cannot heal anyone. But your heart stayed open. Not naive, not foolish. Open. There is strength in that. You can hold boundaries and still carry empathy. You can remember what they did and still understand why they did it. You can protect your peace and still pray for their growth. That is maturity. That is authority. This is why you are appointed to lead them. Because you are not driven by ego. You are driven by clarity. You do not need revenge. You need alignment. You do not crave their apology. You carry understanding. And that makes you dangerous to darkness. Because darkness thrives on division. Darkness multiplies through offense. Darkness spreads through unforgiveness. But you break that cycle. You refuse to become what hurt you. You refuse to mirror what rejected you. You refuse to let their immaturity dictate your identity. That restraint, that awareness, that emotional discipline. It is not accidental, it is anointing. You are able to see their wounds because one day they will trust you with them. You are able to understand their insecurity because one day they will look to you for stability. You are able to hold compassion because leadership requires emotional capacity. Only the chosen recognize this. The ordinary fight enemies, the appointed heal environments. And you have been developing the heart of a shepherd, even when you felt like the outcast. That is reversal. That is divine irony. They misjudged you, but you still saw them clearly. And that clarity is proof. You are not called to dominate them. You are called to guide them, not beneath them, not beside them, ahead of them. If you can see through hostility without absorbing it, if you can feel compassion without losing discernment, if you can remain open without becoming vulnerable to manipulation, then understand this. You are carrying leadership grace, and what you see now in quiet insight will soon become visible authority. Fourth, time has quietly begun reversing the narrative. You feel it. The atmosphere has shifted. The energy in the room is different. The same eyes that once dismissed you now linger a little longer. They are watching, not openly, not loudly, but differently. Have you noticed it? The subtle pause before they speak to you, the careful tone where there used to be casual disregard, the unexpected acknowledgement where there was once silence. This is not imagination. This is reversal. You did not force it. You did not announce yourself. You did not demand recognition. You simply grew. And growth cannot be hidden forever. While they were measuring you by who you used to be, you were evolving. While they were replaying an old version of you, you were stepping into authority. While they were comfortable in their assumptions, you were ascending in silence. Now the contrast is undeniable. Light matures, darkness stagnates, and time exposes both. The ones who overlooked you now sense something undeniable. There is weight in your voice, there is steadiness in your posture, there is clarity in your decisions. You do not chase validation anymore. You do not over-explain. You do not shrink to make others comfortable. That quiet confidence unsettles them because it reveals growth they did not anticipate. Understand this. When God begins to reverse a narrative, he does it subtly first. He allows consistency to speak. He allows discipline to testify. He allows fruit to defend you. Without forcing anything, your growth speaks for itself. And growth is the loudest response to rejection. You did not argue your way into respect. You embodied your way into it. That is authority. The world fights to be seen. The chosen are revealed in time, and now they are recalibrating. The same people who once questioned you now hesitate before criticizing. The same voices that minimized you now seek your input. The same circles that excluded you now feel your absence. Do you see it? The power dynamic has shifted, not because you demanded control, but because you mastered yourself. That is spiritual warfare at a higher level. Darkness tried to freeze you in an old identity, but you kept evolving. Darkness tried to label you prematurely, but you kept maturing. Now the label no longer fits. And they know it. This is not about ego. This is about evidence. Your discipline became visible. Your restraint became noticeable. Your wisdom became undeniable. You are no longer the underestimated one. You are the emerging leader. And here is the deeper truth. Reversal is not just about how they see you. It is about how you see yourself. You no longer view yourself through the lens of rejection. You see assignment. You see positioning. You see divine orchestration. That internal shift changes everything. Because once you believe who you are becoming, the world must adjust. Stand firm in this season. Do not rush it. Do not boast in it. Let time complete what favor has begun. The narrative is turning, quietly, powerfully, inevitably. And if the atmosphere is shifting, if their tone is changing, if subtle respect is replacing old dismissal, then understand this. Leadership is no longer hidden, it is surfacing. Fifth, you no longer crave their validation. Feel the weight of that. There was a time when their approval mattered, when a nod from them lifted your mood, when their silence unsettled you, when their rejection felt like a verdict. But something shifted. The hunger to be accepted has died, not because you became cold, not because you stopped caring, but because you discovered who you are without them. That is power. Have you noticed how you no longer rehearse conversations in your head, how you no longer over-explain your intentions, how you no longer shrink your voice to avoid discomfort? That is growth. You move from identity, not insecurity, before you adjusted to be tolerated. Now you stand to be authentic. before you filtered yourself to fit their expectations. Now you speak with clarity and let the outcome fall where it may. That is not arrogance. That is alignment. Darkness feeds on insecurity. It manipulates through the need for approval. It controls through the fear of exclusion. But you are no longer controlled. Approval no longer governs your obedience. You obey purpose. You obey calling. You obey the assignment placed on your life, even if it costs you applause. That is the pivot. When you stop needing validation, you become unmanageable to manipulation. When you stop chasing acceptance, you become stable in identity. When you stop fearing rejection, you become dangerous to systems built on control. And that is why the shift feels intense. You are not reacting anymore. You are responding. You are not performing anymore. You are becoming. You do not need them to see you because you see yourself. Let that sink in. The chosen do not beg to belong. They belong because they are appointed. An appointment does not require consensus. You have crossed a line internally, a sacred line. You no longer measure yourself by their comfort. You no longer dilute your light to ease their insecurity. You no longer betray your discernment to keep temporary peace. That internal freedom is visible. It changes how you walk. It changes how you speak. It changes how you decide. You feel grounded, steady, unapologetic, not loud, not aggressive, anchored. That anchoring is authority forming because leaders cannot be led by applause. They cannot be steered by criticism. They cannot be moved by every shifting opinion. They must be rooted, and you are rooted now. The very rejection that once hurt you severed your addiction to approval. The very isolation that once felt heavy detached you from the need to fit in. The very warfare that once exhausted you built internal independence. You are not surviving anymore. You are carrying something. You feel it rising. Confidence without ego, clarity without noise, strength without cruelty. That is mature power. And when approval no longer controls you, influence begins to trust you. Because people sense when someone is not trying to impress them. They sense when someone is not trying to win them. They sense when someone stands from conviction instead of insecurity. That steadiness draws attention. It commands respect. You are no longer seeking their validation. You are embodying your assignment, and that changes everything. Sixth, you carry solutions for the same people who resisted you. Let that settle in your spirit. The very environment that pushed you out is the environment you now understand better than anyone else. You see what they cannot see. You discern what they cannot discern. You recognize patterns they are still blind to. Why? Because you survived what they are still repeating. While they were comfortable, you were observing. While they were dismissing you, you were learning. While they were mocking your growth, you were developing insight in silence. And now you carry answers. Answers forged in isolation. Answers sharpened in warfare. Answers refined through rejection. You did not just endure pain, you studied it. You did not just feel exclusion, you analyzed it. You did not just survive confusion, you gained clarity inside it. That is leadership intelligence. The world reacts. The chosen extract wisdom. You developed insight they now lack. Because pain became your teacher. Silence became your classroom. Isolation became your strategy room. They thought you were alone. You were being trained to see root causes, trained to identify dysfunction, trained to hold perspective when emotions run high. And now the very issues they struggle with, you have already overcome internally. You are not guessing. You are grounded. Your wisdom was forged in the very season they mocked. When they laughed at your discipline, you were building consistency. When they dismissed your boundaries, you were building strength. When they questioned your vision, you were refining it. They misjudged the process, but you embraced it. Darkness tried to embarrass you. God was equipping you. That difference changes everything. What they rejected is becoming what they will need. The mindset they called too serious. The discernment they labeled overthinking. The standards they described as too much. Those very qualities are about to become solutions because chaos exposes the need for clarity. Instability exposes the need for grounding. Confusion exposes the need for wisdom. And you carry it. You carry emotional stability. You carry strategic thinking. You carry spiritual discernment, not loudly, not arrogantly, but undeniably. This is why you cannot resent them. You are positioned to guide them, not because you are better, but because you are prepared. Preparation always feels like isolation before it feels like elevation. And now elevation is near. They are beginning to sense it. The shift, the weight, the authority forming around you. You are no longer the misunderstood one. You are the necessary one. Let that truth anchor you. You were rejected for carrying what they were not ready to receive. But readiness changes with time. And when the environment becomes unstable, when uncertainty increases, when their old strategies stop working, they will look for solutions, and you will already have them. This is not coincidence. This is appointment. You did not just survive their resistance, you converted it into wisdom, and wisdom attracts responsibility. 7. Authority rests on you without you announcing it. You do not have to declare it. You do not have to demand it. You do not have to advertise it. It is felt. Have you noticed the shift? When you speak, the room settles. When you give insight, people listen. When you go silent, the absence is noticeable. That is weight, not loud, not forced, not performative. Weight, the kind that cannot be manufactured, the kind that cannot be faked, the kind that only comes from endurance, from warfare, from refinement. You carry presence, and presence is spiritual gravity. Leadership follows spiritual gravity, not popularity. Popularity shouts. Authority does not need to. Popularity seeks attention. Authority commands it without trying. You are not chasing influence anymore. Influence is gathering around you, quietly, naturally, inevitably. People begin asking for your perspective. They begin seeking your advice. They begin measuring their decisions against your discernment. Why? Because you have been tempered. Tempered by rejection, tempered by isolation, tempered by battles you never posted about. Darkness tried to erase your voice, but pressure deepened it. Darkness tried to minimize your presence, but adversity anchored it. Now, when you speak, there is substance. When you move, there is intention. When you decide, there is clarity. That is not ego. That is earned authority. You did not wake up powerful. You were shaped into it. Every time you chose integrity over impulse, authority increased. Every time you chose silence over reaction, authority solidified. Every time you chose growth over bitterness, authority expanded. You are no longer just surviving environments. You are influencing them, and you do not even have to try. That is the sign. When you walk into a space, you feel it. Some resist you, some respect you, some are drawn to you. Light exposes, light attracts, light confronts. And you carry light. That is why darkness reacted so aggressively to you in the beginning. Because darkness recognizes authority before the person carrying it does. But now you see it. You feel it. You are not small. You are not invisible. You are not waiting to be validated. You are established internally. An internal establishment produces external recognition. Stand firm in that. Do not shrink now. Do not question it now. Do not apologize for the weight you carry. Authority is not arrogance. Authority is alignment. You aligned with your assignment. You endured the shaping. You survived the resistance. Now gravity is working for you. Leadership is no longer a distant possibility. It is a present reality forming around you. People may not say it openly, but they feel it, and so do you. The one they once dismissed now carries the room without effort. That is reversal at a higher level. You are no longer preparing for leadership. You are embodying it. 8th, the battlefield is shifting into a platform. Feel that. The very ground where you were tested is becoming the ground where you will be seen. The same space that exposed you to humiliation is turning into a stage for demonstration. Do you see the reversal? The conversations that once tried to diminish you now pause when you speak. The environment that once resisted you now adjusts around your presence. The atmosphere that once felt hostile now feels expectant. This is not coincidence. Warfare is transforming into visible favor. The enemy fought you in that place for a reason. Darkness tried to exhaust you there, tried to embarrass you there, tried to silence you there. Why that specific environment? Because that environment was always meant to witness your rise. You thought it was punishment. It was positioning. You thought it was rejection. It was rehearsal. The place of humiliation is becoming your platform. Look at how you move now. Look at how you carry yourself now. Look at how unshaken you have become. That composure did not form in comfort. It formed under pressure, and now pressure has nothing left to threaten you with. You already survived the worst of it, when whispers no longer break you, when isolation no longer weakens you, when opposition no longer intimidates you. What power does the battlefield have? Left none. And when the battlefield loses power over you, it becomes a platform beneath you. That is spiritual authority. You are no longer fighting for survival in that space. You are standing with stability in that space. And people can feel it. They sense that something shifted. They sense that you are no longer reacting. They sense that you are no longer seeking acceptance. You are established. This is the moment where warfare exposes favor, because favor is not always gentle. Sometimes favor looks like endurance. Sometimes favor looks like staying when others leave. Sometimes favor looks like being refined in public. But when the refinement is complete, when the shaping is finished, when the fire has done its work, favor becomes visible. You are stepping into visible authority, not loud, not boastful, but undeniable. The same ground that once felt like a battlefield now feels like solid footing. And that footing is elevating you. Stand firm. Do not retreat now. Do not second guess now. Do not shrink when the spotlight begins to form. You were trained for visibility. You were shaped for responsibility. You were preserved for this moment. Darkness tried to mark that environment as your defeat. God marked it as your unveiling. This is bigger than ego. This is destiny alignment. The resistance was confirmation. The humiliation was preparation. The warfare was qualification. Now the shift is undeniable. The battlefield is becoming your platform. And if this shift is happening, if the same space that resisted you is beginning to receive you, if the tension is turning into recognition, then understand this. You are about to step fully into what you were shaped for. Ninth, you are being positioned to shepherd the very voices that once doubted you. Feel the gravity of that. The same mouths that questioned you will soon seek your counsel. The same eyes that overlooked you will look to you for direction. The same hearts that resisted you will depend on your steadiness. This is not ego. This is destiny. When confusion rises, they will search for clarity. When instability spreads, they will search for grounding. When their old structures collapse, they will search for someone who endured. And you endured. Your survival became proof of divine appointment. You did not just make it through. You were preserved through. Preserved when others broke. Preserved when others compromised. Preserved when others turned bitter. Why? Because you were never just surviving rejection. You were being initiated into rulership. What felt like betrayal was initiation. Every time they excluded you, you learned independence. Every time they doubted you, you learned conviction. Every time they misjudged you, you learned restraint. Rulers are not crowned in comfort. They are forged in contradiction. You were forged. And now the shift is undeniable. You are not returning to that environment as the wounded one. You are not returning as the insecure one. You are not returning to prove anything. You are returning with authority. Authority that does not beg. Authority that does not argue. Authority that does not tremble. Authority that stands. This is why darkness fought you so aggressively. Because once you step into this level of leadership, you dismantle cycles. You break patterns. You end dysfunction. You shepherd. You guide. You stabilize. The very voices that once doubted you will trust you. Not because you forced them, not because you shamed them, but because your consistency outlived their skepticism. That is power. You are not rising to dominate. You are rising to govern wisely. You are not elevated to humiliate. You are elevated to heal. And that makes you dangerous to darkness. Because healed leaders create healed environments. Stable leaders create stable systems. Awakened leaders expose hidden corruption. And you are awake, fully awake. Do not shrink from this. Do not question this. Stand in it. You were never random. You were never overlooked by heaven. You were never fighting alone. You are chosen to lead, chosen to endure, chosen to return with authority. Everything that tried to break you built you. Everything that tried to silence you strengthened you. Everything that tried to bury you planted you. Look at you now, still standing, still growing, still called. Type 9 in the comments if you feel this confirmation in your spirit. Stand publicly in your appointment. Subscribe if you are ready to walk fully in your leadership. Because this is not the end. This is the unveiling. You are not just surviving rejection. You are stepping into rulership. You are protected. You are marked. You are appointed. And nothing formed against your destiny will stand.